Hey, it's more You're All Doomed, the podcast that stalks its way through Freddy vs. Jason 13 minutes at a time. I'm surprisingly underwhelming Greg.
And I'm just Brian.
And this segment begins with Gib continuing to wander through the boiler room / grain silo and ends with Lori and Will pressed up against a window.
In that silo / boiler room, Gib is trying to find her way out, and around every corner she sees Freddy waiting for her. The two finally meet face to face, and Freddy says, "The only thing to fear is fear himself." And as Gib tries to back away from Freddy, she trips and goes flying over a railing, bouncing off a set of lockers below. Back in the cornfield, our least favorite glow stick covered raver punk is now lying on top of Gib, kissing her neck. We see someone's vantage point through the stalks of corn. We know who it is. It's Jason. In the dream silo / boiler room, Gib struggles to pick herself up following her little tumble. She somewhat cleverly decides to hide in one of the lockers, but Freddy manages to find her rather quickly. Just as he opens the locker door, Gib's chest explodes, and Freddy is understandably pretty confused.
Yeah, a fountain of blood erupts in his face. Something has obviously happened to her in the real world. Apparently, she's been run through when Jason impaled the light stick wearing rapist laying on top of her. He is hilariously flung away, light sticks flying everywhere. And in the dream world, Gib's form turns black and crumbles away almost like she got snapped by Thanos. This infuriates Freddy. Gib, who I would have thought was named like Sarah Gibson or something, but actually her name was Gib Smith, was played by Catherine Isabel. She appeared in the movie Ginger Snaps and has a lot of crossover with the usual shows that we see from this era, like Supernatural, etc. The rapist, also known as Fristle, was played by Alex Green. Amusingly, Internet Movie Database has a different Alex Green linked to his name, some guy who died at the age of 68 in 2010.
I noticed that too. It was hilarious. I couldn't find anything about the actual dude. It was just this. I'm like, I even went back and looked at the screenshot and I'm like, there's no way that dude is that old. I'm like, okay, it's clearly the wrong person.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Back at the party, for some reason, Shaq's football teammate is holding the joint while Shaq takes a puff from it. The two are laughing about how wasted they are, oblivious to the fact that Jason is standing right behind them. I have a couple of problems with Jason here. Despite that Shaq and his buddy are standing up, Jason appears to be at least 2 feet taller than him. And the other thing is, Jason's neck is really, really long.
Yeah, that's a good segue to talk about Jason's appearance in this movie overall. You're right; he looks a little bit pencil-necked in this installment, which is a criticism that former Jason Kane Hodder has made. We'll come back to that later. But he's also weirdly shiny and blackened, almost like he's been spit roasted or something. He doesn't look decayed so much as almost mummified or fossilized or something. And
his head is very waxy.
Yeah, he's got a weird look this time. And he looks almost like he's dressed in something from the J. Crew catalog that he ordered and then wore, for years and is now tattered and whatnot. But he looks a little bit too much like he's wearing an outfit.
Shaq's reaction to Jason's arrival is admittedly pretty damn funny. He goes, "Whoa, Jethro, this is a rave, not a Halloween party. Why don't you go find yourself a pig to fuck?" And then Shaq's buddy says, "Invite only, corn poke, and you weren't invite." And before he can finish his sentence, Jason twists his head around 180 degrees. So R.I.P. Shaq's friend.
Yeah, that effect is terrible. By the way, I feel like they really rushed that quite a bit or just leaned too heavily on CGI because it could have been great and it was just very lame. This douchebag was played by Colby Johansson, who was on all of the usual shows from this era, but also played Flat Top on Battlestar Galactica. Shaq then douses Jason with the Everclear they'd been drinking and lights him on fire with a white supremacist tiki torch and hightails it with Jason in hot pursuit. There's a great overhead shot of the trail of flame that Jason is making through the cornfield that echoes that shot of Heather swimming earlier. And I really like that they resisted the urge to use CGI fire effects here. This is all practical, and it's great. It really looks nice.
It's utterly absurd, but it's also really awesome. It's just a great shot. Like, if you just don't stop to think about it for a second and just think it's Jason Voorhees on fire, marching his way through a cornfield and leaving a trail of fire behind him. It's a really, really great visual.
Yeah. There are a couple of moments where it's a stuntman in the costume and he's doing a full body burn, and you can see that he's wearing fire resistant goggles under the hockey mask because you can see some reflections in Jason's eye holes. But otherwise it holds up really, really well. And you're right. It's a ridiculous idea. It reminded me of that movie, The Relic, where there's this angry monster that I think even has like AIDS infected blood, and it's chasing the heroine, and it's also on fire, as though it needed to be that much scarier.
Jason emerges from the cornfield with his now flaming machete raised above his head. Shaq runs toward the partygoers, but before he can warn everyone, the aforementioned flaming machete flies through the air and goes through Shaq's chest. So R.I.P. Shaq.
He was played by Chris Gauthier, who appeared in the Aurora Tea Garden Mysteries with Lexa Doig from Jason X. He was also in Zack Snyder's Watchmen and Christopher Nolan's Insomnia. Shaq's death causes the partygoers to freak out and scatter as Jason emerges from the corn, beginning his massacre, which, in hindsight, is much tamer than I remember. I thought I remembered him just slaughtering dozens of people, but we really only get 6. We get a guy who's wearing a hat. He's sliced across the chest. We get some dude wearing a puka shell necklace. He's also sliced across the neck and chest. A guy tries to throw a Molotov cocktail at Jason, but is sliced down his torso. This also punctures a keg of beer, which extinguishes Jason, so he's no longer on fire. There's a quick interlude of Laurie and Will finding Gibbs' body out in the corn, but they immediately continue their escape and forget about her. Back at the party, a flannel guy gets a machete through his gut. A dude wearing a beanie is also slashed across the chest. And then next to him, a random girl who is mostly unseen is presumably hacked to death too.
Amidst the chaos of everyone running away, Will, Laurie, and Kia stumble upon Gibbs' body, but there's not much they can do about it, so they continue to run away. We then cut to Mark's brother's bitchin' van, and in the back is Freeberg, Linderman, and Kia, because she's a survivor. She's not going to give up. She's not going to stop, she's going to work harder. Will's driving the van, and Laurie is riding shotgun. Kia wants to know if the party crasher is the dude from Laurie's dreams. Obviously, this is someone different. Linderman brings up a good point. Who cares about the dream guy when the guy in the hockey mask is real? And that's when Freeberg chimes in. Man, that goalie was pissed about something.
There are 2 things about this moment that I want to point out. One is that we see a Misfits air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror of the van, which I thought was cute. And then all of my notes, I'm inconsistent with how I refer to the character Lindemann. I call him Lernader and Lerndenden, and I can never remember his name for some reason.
Will is kind enough to drop everyone off at home following the bloody massacre. Parked outside of Laurie's house, he tells her that he was sent to the Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital because he saw her dad kill her mother. Laurie thinks her mom was killed in a car accident, but that's just what her dad wants her to believe. That's when we cut to a flashback where one night Will is sneaking up to Laurie's room via a trellis outside, and through the window he saw Laurie's dad murdering his wife. Will's little flashback story is interrupted by Laurie's dad pounding on the passenger side window of the van. Dr. Campbell and Will get into a brief fight in the street, and Laurie runs off into the house.
There was some pretty convincing choking going on there. The doctor was strangling Will, and I wouldn't be surprised to learn that was not a stunt.
Yeah, he was definitely coming off as someone that could have potentially killed his wife. Back in the house, Laurie confronts her dad about her mother's death, and she learns that her dad is more than just a doctor. He's also doing some consulting at the Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital. Lori then realizes that her dad knew about Will this whole time and never said anything. So Dr. Campbell does the responsible father thing and tries to get Lori to take some Hypnosil, and they'll talk about this all in the morning.
She locks herself in her room and escapes through the window. We get some pretty humorous panic acting from her as she hides behind a tree while her dad leans out the window yelling her name. She then takes off along the sidewalk, and we get an unnecessary along the hedge kind of jump scare with Will. I don't know if they were kind of trying to homage Halloween or something, but it was just they needed a scare there. Driving away in the van, they decide to go find Mark so they can consult with him about what to do next. Now that his name has been mentioned, we transition to Mark at his house with his parents nowhere to be found, yet apparently they still live there. He's looking through old photos of his brother. Then he hears his name being whispered and goes down the hall to see steam coming from beneath the closed bathroom door. Opening the door, upon an enormous bathroom with more wasted wall space than my in-laws' guest bathroom, he finds nothing inside. Opening the mirrored medicine cabinet, which contains nothing noteworthy, although there is one weirdly spiky hermit crab shell, he pulls out a bottle of Wake Aid. There's only one pill left. There's a closing the cabinet scare with Freddy leering at him in the mirror, which causes Mark to drop the bottle, and that single pill goes down the sink drain. He squeezes sleep from his eyes and turns around to see the tub filled with blood and his brother bobbing to the surface.
And floating in that bathtub is none other than Scut Fargus. What a rotten name. There he stood, between us and the alley. Scut Fargus, staring out at us with his yellow eyes. He had yellow eyes, so help me God, yellow eyes! So Mark's brother, who's bobbing in the bloody water of the bathtub, turns to Mark and says, "Hey, Mark, you didn't forget about me, did you?" And then Mark's voice quickly changes to Freddy's voice. "Oh, that's right. Everyone forgot. That's why they weren't afraid. That's why I needed Jason to kill for me to get them to remember."
Which we'd already established, so I don't know why Freddy had to, explain all that.
Exactly.
I did like, however, though, that while he's speaking through the brother's body, he's gesticulating wildly and flinging blood everywhere from the suicide slashes on the brother's wrists. That blood then puddles around Mark's feet, and spiky tendrils wrap themselves around his ankles, plus some snakes. And I want to pause here to just comment on Mark's delivery of, "Somebody please wake me up." It was really good. It was desperate and horrified, and that actor did a really nice job there.
I agree. He plays crazy really well. There's a number of scenes in this movie where he's just like really just horrified and just screaming out in terror. And I think he does a really good job of capturing that.
Outside, the serpent van pulls up. Will and Lori jump out and frantically try to get into the house, but I'm not sure what warrants the urgency from their perspective. They don't know anything is going wrong with Mark. They just wanted to come over to consult with him, but they're running like bats out of hell. They do see Mark asleep through the window, and so they begin pounding on the glass to wake him up. Back in the dream world, Mark is cowering in the corner as Freddy brother, whose skin is bubbling nicely, trudges closer to him. He wants Mark to deliver a little message, but Mark refuses. This angers Freddy, and he hurls Mark against the wall and lights his back on fire, which Will and Lori see happen in the real world through the window. Mark slams up against that glass and collapses, so we end on Will and Lori pounding on the glass in fear and grief for their friend. The death count here is 10, although I'm tempted to maybe include the brother as number 11, although we didn't see him die on screen.
To hear what I triple dog dared Greg to do, turn in next week for another episode of
You're All Doomed.